Hello and welcome to today's daily response video. I'm Zara Rush, creative producer for People Make It Work, and today I am joined by our associate, Kamaljit Poonia. Hi Cam.
Hi Zara, how are you?
I'm all right, it's really good to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me.
To begin with, could you give everyone a snapshot of what you do for People Make It Work and kind of your areas of specialism?
Great, thanks. I've been working with People Make It Work for a couple of years now, and I've been facilitating workshops on diversity or inclusion and equality issues, predominantly in the arts sector with yourselves, but also other organisations. I've worked with the project with Coventry, which is looking at at a leadership program to make it inclusive. So I work as an advisor, as a consultant on these sort of areas, and I run workshops.
Okay, amazing. And at this point in time, you know, we're week 8 of lockdown. I would love to kind of get your insights over the last span of time where we've been in isolation, and what's been coming up for you.
Great. I mean, like everybody else, this has kind of been a real puncher in the sort of momentum of daily life that I was in. Sudden stop to the work that we had planned coming up, and how life is normally functioning. So it's meant kind of challenges on different levels, suddenly stopping and looking at how to respond to the current situation. I mean, my parents live in an extended family situation, so they live with my brother and his family, and they have grandchildren. Immediately this happened, we needed to think about their safety and how we could isolate my mum in particular, who has bad asthma. So my father came to live with us here in Bristol, and suddenly I was doing a lot more caring work, and my whole life sort of timetable changed. And it really made me think about what's important. I think at times like this, that's what it makes you reflect on, that what's really important is family and connection, and being there for each other and kind of caring for each other. I think as a country and as individuals, we've all kind of come to realize certain things that maybe in our busyness we're not paying enough attention to. So yeah, that's meant letting go of certain things and actually focusing on what's really important in life.
And what has that meant for you when you apply that reflective thinking to your work and to the areas of work that you work within?
Yeah, I mean, it has given me time to reflect on things like, why am I actually so passionate about equality and inclusion issues? You know, why am I so involved in this work? What drew me to it? And it's helped me, and it actually put me in a position where I'm thinking about, well, what are my values? You know, what has been my life experience that has made me so passionate about this area? A lot of reflections about my childhood and sort of the values that I developed very early on that resonated with me as being true. And these were sort of formed through a lot of sort of stories that my father told me, and quite spiritual stories, because I'm a Sikh, and Sikhism is a religion or a way of thinking that's really steeped in equality and really steeped in fundamental human rights. And the stories that he told me, which I think exist in many religions and in all cultures actually, come down to the value of human life and the equality that we have between us. So there's one, insight that Guru Nanak came through with, is that there's no gender differences, there are no caste differences. In fact, there are no differences in religion. We are all people that are of the same, and we all have the same rights as each other, and everything flows from that. And even as a young child at the age of 7 and 8, this resonated with me as being true, and something that was bigger than words like equality and inclusion. It's actually about values and about the sort of world that we want to live in. So actually, yeah, quite a lot of sort of deep fundamental reflection.
And those fundamental aspects of life that are carried through those stories, those ancient stories through history, and how they iterate through generations.
Absolutely, and they are actually so at the core of what equality, inclusion, diversity is actually really about. So then it made me think about, well, how does that relate to the work that I do? And one of the things that I've seen over the years that I've worked in organizations on these issues, both internally and externally, is that inclusion often is not seen as is articulated in our mission and our values, but the reality of it is much harder to make happen. And sometimes it gets left as if this is the day job, and then we'll look at the equality and inclusion issues. But I actually think we need to turn that round and say, in the heart of everything that we do, how does inclusion sit in this? Both in terms of personal needs, in terms of my values, where does inclusion sit in this? Why do I think it's important? But where does it sit in the organisation? And how do we make sure that it's at the centre of what we do and not something that we add on, either because a funder is asking us for information, or suddenly we have a crisis situation and we think that we need to look at diversity. How do we make it at the core of what we're doing? And I think this is a really good moment in time for us to make this an issue which is actually informing everything we do, rather than something that we're going to wait to do until we've done everything else.
I feel like just as you're speaking, and having worked with you closely on the Coventry project, there was something that we did that you informed us about, a practice of being able to kind of check yourself against some certain criteria along the way, and that you check yourself at the very start, and then every process along the way you're asking those same questions. And maybe that could be useful, having those questions about how you make anything inclusive, and being able to check that along your processes. Do you have any further thoughts on that?
Well, I think we are now coming into a moment of time when we're beginning to look at what next. We've been through this period where we suddenly went into lockdown and we changed very quickly. But now we're beginning to think about, as things start to open up, what's the shape of the future going to look like? And I think now is the time to ask ourselves, in the shaping of the future, are the inclusion questions being asked? So do we look at who are we including in the discussions about how we shape the future? Is that inclusive? Have we got enough diversity around the table to inform us about and challenge us in our thinking, so that we don't just fall into the same old patterns? And if we haven't got that diversity around our conversations, how can we reach out and include more people in that discussion? Be that people with disabilities, or people from minority ethnic groups, people from economically disadvantaged backgrounds. You know, one thing that this current situation has really shown us is that there are some very deep structural inequalities in the way that people are experiencing their lives and the way that this situation is affecting them. That has always been there, but it's been brought into sharp relief by what's happened. So if we really believe that inclusion is one of our values, how are we going to reach out to those people? How are we going to make sure that the way that we do things, be it online or be it in person, actually goes out to those people who are the most excluded, to those who've been most affected by inequalities in society? So some of that is about informing ourselves and getting more, more informed on these issues, and asking ourselves about our own values, the values of the organisation, and then the how. How are we going to do this? How do we actually take those next steps? And continue to check that out with ourselves, as you say, along every part of the process.
Thank you so much for providing some of those questions that we could be ruminating on, starting to think about and applying. And thank you also for sharing of yourself in a personal way, and where you're at in this current moment. It's really great to have been speaking with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Zara.